Sounds good. One of the concerns that's been raised is the eastern part of the county. Can you comment on what plans you have for that?
So when I got here, there were, basically four projects that were major on the east side of the county. And there was something that wasn't yet an issue. So the first thing I did is I tackled working with Montgomery College to agree to put a campus on the east side of the county. We need it over there. We need a higher education facility. We need people to be able to get to it easily, which, if you're up on, Colesville Road, the farther you get outside the Beltway, the farther removed you are from, being able to get to any college presence, Montgomery College presence. So we're going to get, because the college has agreed to this, we're going to get a campus on the east side of the county. And I think that's going to be big. It's going to help the kids in high schools link to programs at the college that will help them. I'm hopeful. I don't run the college, but we've talked to them about focusing program development on areas in this county where we know we have job deficits, and particularly where people of color, don't have the opportunities to get jobs. And so whether it's nurses or hospital technicians, whether it's people who work in labs or do manufacturing, but don't actually need, graduate degrees or even college degrees to be techs, we want to make sure we can supply, going to the Amazon point, we want to be sure we can supply the technical training to people who, in Montgomery County, so they can get jobs who want to do it on the east side of the county, because they've kind of been neglected. And one thing that, could happen off of that is spinning off businesses on the east side of the county. So I think there's a synergy between educational development and economic development. The other thing were the economic projects on the east side of the county. When I came here, Viva White Oak was going nowhere, and that's just a fact. You haven't broken dirt on anything. They still have unresolved issues. We were told when it was approved that, development would happen almost instantly. There were all these people who were going to come here, and they didn't. It's just a fact. People can, say it's not true, but it is true, and you can go listen to the council hearings so it's true. But they haven't approached us. They haven't approached the Economic Development Corporation for any assistance on anything. So I really don't know what's going on there. I can tell you that this week we brought them a potentially large project. I can't say what it is, but if we're going to meet next week, and if they're interested, we may get a breakthrough in terms of developing a big development on their property. And that would be good, because I still have $40 million sitting in a fund for the infrastructure that they're going to need. And that's something that's a legacy from when I was county executive. But the other projects at the Gateway at New Hampshire Avenue, when I got here, that was stuck, not going anywhere. I sat down with our folks in transportation and our planning folks, and worked with the company that was doing the development, and found solutions that would work, and then supported them in front of Park and Planning, and their project is going forward. I was there this week for the announcement that their apartment buildings are going to be 100% powered by electricity, no natural gas, and one building will be entirely powered off of solar. So that's one project. There's retail and other stuff that goes along with that project. Second project was Town Center on Colesville Road, and they were also stuck between us and Park and Planning. I sat down again with the developer personally and worked with my staff to figure out how do we solve these problems. They were able to solve the problem. We got a very nice note from the developer for doing that, and they were able to move forward through Park and Planning. The third project is Burtonsville, which, as we all know, has languished, I guess, forever, since the shopping center was allowed to move across the street and then abandon the relatively new shopping center that was in Burtonsville. We have a developer for our piece of land that wants to build 2 apartments and a structured parking garage. And Eden's has a deal with the grocery store now. And so that project's going to go forward. And I was, again, personally involved working with Eden's to try to move this project forward. And we're now able to move it forward. So 3 out of 4, I was able to get moving, there was not a problem working with the developer. We're still waiting for Jonathan to bring us something to work with. And if he brings us something to work with, we'll work with him like we worked with everybody else. And we're also modifying the BRT, which was, I would say, designed at a low level of efficiency. It runs in mixed traffic south of New Hampshire Avenue. And we're now doing the study to take the BRT out of mixed traffic south of New Hampshire Avenue. I've got a long-term vision that actually gets it off the shoulders as well, because that's not the best place to have it running. But I think we're going to make progress on this. We're starting to get interest from the state in helping us fund some of these projects, which we've never gotten before. So I think with the new governor, and hopefully if it's a Democratic governor, that they'll understand the value of making investments in Montgomery County. I always remind people, even folks from other jurisdictions, that you actually want Montgomery County to succeed, because a lot of the tax money the state has comes from Montgomery County. And so the more money we pour into the state treasury, the more money there is to help you with your projects. And without Montgomery County's money, then the whole state suffers from lack of resources to do the things they want to do. So they don't have to do it because they like us. They should just do it because we're all bound in this together, and they benefit from our success. And I'm happy to have them benefit from our success. I just would like them to think less parochially and more openly about how this benefits everybody in the state.
All right, let me turn to another topic. What have you done about early childhood education?
So when I ran for election, I told people I was not going to make a Christmas tree of promises, which is not exactly the most thrilling thing to tell a group of people. But I said, we're going to run out of money, and I want to make sure we can do two things. We can move transit forward because we weren't far enough in design, and that we would continue to invest in early childhood. So, I'm a former teacher. To me, early childhood is the absolute essential ingredient in getting all kids to grade level by the time they start kindergarten. And it is increasingly difficult to narrow gaps for children to make up for what they didn't learn the older they get. And children who start on a level playing field in kindergarten, who can, understand letters, understand the adequate, what you need to know about numbers. I'm not talking about having them at a second grade level, but just getting the basics that all of us got when we were kids makes it easier for them to access information and learn. And if they don't have that, they struggle. And, I saw kids, I taught 4th and 5th grade. And I had students who were still functioning at the 1st and 2nd grade level because they had never gotten the foundational stuff in the curriculum you get. Assumes that you've got the foundational stuff, and there's not a lot of time to teach foundational stuff in the regular curriculum. So we continued to make investments. We upped it, $5 million a year for the first 3 years, despite the really hard times that were caused in the first year by a huge budget shortfall caused by the previous budget. And then the second 2 years just by COVID and decisions that we'd limit spending to same services. But I continued to make those increases. This year we put 20 million into early childhood, and we need to increase the number of seats in the county. We need to really think about what we're doing. I am, pushing people to work with the school system. I know the school system wants to go into this space, but there's a inherent problem for you wonky people out there. A lot of childcare providers handle both infants and young kids, and children under two and under require a different ratio of staff. And so for a lot of people, that ratio would never pay for itself, that you couldn't get enough for the childcare for an infant in order to pay for the service. And so it's partly subsidized by the rates, for the older kids, so the centers can operate. If the school system tries to provide all the early childhood slots, there's not going to be any way for folks who are providing infant care to be able to support the infant care. So we want a coordinated response between the state, the county, and our private providers so that we have a balanced system that can serve everyone. I wish we could do what DC did, but I don't have a $20 billion budget. I have a $6 billion budget. That's the glory of DC being a state. They get access to stuff we can't get access to. But I think, we need to make this as affordable as possible. We need to reach as many people as possible, and we need to reach them earlier. Fourth grade is 4 years old is not early enough. 3 years old is really not early enough. We really ought to be out there in the 1 to 2, or at least the 2-year-old space, so we can make sure that we can provide 3 years of foundational learning that'll help these kids be successful. So that's something I'm committed to. I'm going to continue to work with our folks in the school and the private providers to make sure we can create a system that's inclusive, and that we don't wind up robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Okay, I'm going to skip 2 topics. If we have time, we'll come back to them. One, school safety, because I know you've done a number of things about that, and affordable housing. What I want to talk about next, and racial equity, but what I want to talk about next is climate change, because I think you've done some important things there. What, tell me about the climate change plans.
So when I was on the council, we passed a resolution. So the resolution came with no action items. It was just, we need to, reduce by whatever by 2027, 100% by 2035. We had no way of getting there. And I think all of us knew, and we were told that would be extraordinarily difficult lift. But a couple of us on the council, it didn't start with everybody, but a couple of us kept making the point that if you have a modest goal that you can achieve, then you may achieve that and then say, well, that's my goal for 27. And if I make it, then we're just on cruise control. And the fact is, you need a goal that it's going to be very hard to achieve. You don't set goals that you're certain of achieving if the crisis is bigger than what your certainty is. If you're in a major crisis, you set a goal to deal with the crisis, and you moved as far down that track as you can go, but you at least want to be in a situation where you can never look at what you've done and say, done enough. That's what the plan said. We do this by this year, and it was a safe, attainable goal, and we're done with it. So we had a very aggressive plan instead. And my first year in office, we created the citizens group to go out and bring back information and help us craft the kind of things that should go in a plan. And I'm a big believer in doing that. I didn't want to start with a consulting firm. I wanted to end with that. I didn't want to start with it. And I got criticized because I took money for what I think some people call the climate czar out of the budget. This was a budget that I had cut $90 million out of because of the revenue shortfall we had. And I felt that since we didn't have any plans yet, what I needed to do is to get the plan, and I could save money by not hiring somebody who would basically have nothing to do. And so we focused the money on things the budget needed, but we kept this citizen group working to provide a plan. They gave us their report. That went over to the consultant that we did hire at that point, and they helped us prioritize and develop a plan. The first draft I thought was a little not as specific as it needed to be. The second draft addressed that. It's still a very aggressive plan. And my charge to my staff has always been, don't write a plan that you think will get passed. Don't make those compromises. Write the plan that we need and let other people compromise it. But don't compromise it ourselves, because all that means is you're going to get less than you need. So let's have the full discussion about a plan, and let's talk about what's going to be needed in the plan. And that's kind of been our approach, is to not compromise things. So when we get to the present, when we did the International Green Building Code, we were already under the Green Building Code, but major compromises were made to that bill when it was passed when I was on the council. And the administration sent over a bill that was a lot weaker than what the original language was. When it came to my staff this time, I said, don't weaken anything. If somebody wants to weaken it, let them weaken it, and then everybody will know that it was weakened. But I do not want that done by our hands. And so we didn't weaken anything, and the council passed a very, very strong green building code. And we did the same thing on building energy performance standards. We put out very, very aggressive standards with the same direction. No watering down, no pre-cuts in our shop. Let them see what we need to do and let us have a discussion what we need to do. That's one of the dangers when people anticipate opposition and you start watering stuff down. You never know whether you actually either could have won the argument, convinced people this was important to do this way. You've already ceded that ground, and I didn't want our folks ceding any ground on this. So we put forward a pretty aggressive plan. And so we've got a green building code for new buildings. We've got the BEPS, building energy performance standards for existing buildings. The councils put money aside and some direction on, especially trying to target money on low-income housing, for example, where that could, if you noticed our climate plan, the first chapter is about equity. We do not want to displace people in the name of climate change. I'm not interested in, fixing up a building and then saying, oh, so sad, these people can't afford to live here anymore. That would be, I think, really tragic, and it would be very bad for the county. So we'll have money in the plan to help with transitions for both the private sector and for affordable housing nonprofits, so they can make this transition. And I will say that, technological changes have made things that we didn't even think about 3 years ago as being possible are starting to come into sight. So our bus fleet will be electrified, and our vehicle fleet in general will be electrified. The schools took advantage of a program that I told them about that involves, tax credits and basically leasing the buses from a company that can use all the tax credits, which the government can't use. We don't get tax credits because you don't pay taxes. And so the tax credits go to an investor, and we get a lower price on the vehicles to offset some of the price difference between an electric vehicle and a non-electric vehicle. And we're looking at that in principle for other purchases where we don't need to own the asset. We just need to get a cleaner asset. We've got, we've done some solar. We have the biggest affordable solar project, I was told, in the country out at Oaks Landfill. It was sadly limited to 6 megawatts. It could have been more than 3 times that big. But because of state regulations, it limited the size of community solar. They just raised the limits to 5. And for each, so we had 3 sites out there. We're going to go back and we're going to apply for upping the solar output in all 3 of those to reach what we think we can attain. All our buildings, new buildings will be net zero. Other buildings are being renovated under the same principle as building energy performance standards to bring them up the code. So I can say we're being really aggressive about this. We've hired hydrologists to work with us in identifying our weaknesses in terms of flooding and where the floodplains are, and what we need to do. And you got to look at this bigger than the street that floods, because you've got to look at the whole watershed that's directing all the water to the places that flood, which is what we're going to be doing. And so they're already prioritizing areas and identifying high priority projects that need to be done right away. So I'd say that we're pretty deep into this. We're redoing our waste facility in order to shut down the incinerator as soon as the council and I adopt a plan which will not involve incineration. Then we will trigger the timeline for shutting the incinerator down. We're going to use that hopefully to put solar fields where the incinerator is right now. We've started a food composting pilot that's actually become a food composting policy for private and residential uses. And we believe that it has potential to be used in a digester to be able to produce a clean fuel that we can run our buses on. And at worst, we'll get good compost that has high value because it has not just leaves and mulch, but it's actually now enhanced by organic matter, other organic matter. So I'm optimistic about where we're going. And our goals for 2027 are tough. We're going to get a boost from the auto industry as they shift over to electric cars. I mean, there are sectors that I'm pretty sure we can get to. If we don't achieve the goal by 27, we can certainly get our goals by 2035. I think buildings, residential and commercial, are manageable, and I think vehicles are manageable, particularly if the dealers only sell electric cars. That makes this really simple. But I think that the problem is the grid, and the grid is over 30% of our energy, and most of our grid is natural gas, coal, and nuclear, with a smattering of solar and wind. But Montgomery County becomes the buyer for all electricity in Montgomery County as soon as the new regs are approved. We're a pilot for a community choice energy, and we're going to be the pilot in the state, and we'll have the entire buying power of Montgomery County that we can put out there to solicit bids from energy companies. And I've already been approached by some clean energy companies if they're interested in this and about supplying us. And so I'm sure we're going to be walking into a competitive market. When you've got 1 million residents, you've got, almost 400,000 residential buildings and tons of commercial buildings. Somebody's going to want this business. And I think that being in the position to consciously favor things that are clean may help us speed the transition to clean energy in Montgomery County. And one reason I'm motivated, I put solar on my roof a little less than 2 months ago, and I'm already seeing that this is going to pay for itself. It is pretty remarkable, and there are a whole lot of rooftops that could do this. Where the county has to get involved, then we get into the cost of putting this together. And I would love to have the grid go clean quicker, and that's what community choice energy could get us, so that I could focus the money we need to invest on helping people transition their buildings, because that's not going to be a cheap proposition for a lot of people. And if I don't have to build the clean energy, if I can buy the clean energy and residents can make individual choices, which I hope they continue to do to accelerate the clean energy at the home level, I think we actually have a path to getting there. So we'll know in a year or so what we can get on the market. More clean energy is coming on the market every year. So this is far different than even what it was 3 years ago. So I'm an optimist.
Sounds like you've got an awful lot going to address climate change, and I'm impressed.
Can I make a point about that real quickly?
Sure.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff we're doing, and I want to point out to people that as disruptive as COVID was, and a lot of places just weren't able to manage it. They managed COVID, but a lot of other things went by the wayside. We made a decision, and I told people in the very beginning, I told them every problem that was facing us when I got elected is going to be staring at us when we get out of COVID. So I wanted everybody to keep planning and figuring out what we would do and how we'd move the needle forward. And whenever we had the opportunity to move the needle forward and not wait till the end of COVID and say, okay, COVID's over, now we're going back to work. Everybody's job in the real world on addressing real challenges remained the same during COVID. And we continued to work as we could and still manage this miserable disease.
Yeah, I think that sounds impressive. As I say, if we had time, I would have us talk about school safety, because I know you've done quite a few things there, affordable housing, racial equity, but because I know you need to be going, we will have to pass on those, but I know you've accomplished quite a bit on those fronts as well.
So if we like, we can come back and do another segment, maybe a half hour focused on housing and some of this other stuff.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.